Let's talk about our basic strategic priorities here. We have, the commissioners went through a process this last year based upon the executive leadership team, which is all the department heads, saying strategically what should we be working on the next few years that will position us in the best way possible for the next several years as far as an organization. They then brought those ideas forward. There was a large, about 20 or 30 of them. Commissioners then this last January and February distilled those down to 4 big overarching objectives they want to go ahead and make movement on, if you will, the next, between now and August. Now, next August. Why between now and next August? Because that's when the primaries come into play, and then you've got elections in next November, and the reality is commissioners have about a window of 18 months to go ahead and make changes or advance a policy issue. That's how all politics put together. That's how our system works. So we have 4 big initiatives. First of all, talking about self-sufficiency, dealing with vulnerable populations. That really is more succinctly worded in my viewpoint, trying to mitigate the negative effects of increasing suburban poverty. Recognizing first that suburban poverty is an issue for us in Johnson County as part of that conversation, but second of all, what do we do about it? From that is the second big point. Number 2 is trying to develop a transportation plan for all modes of transportation. That really is more succinctly talked about as what are we going to do about transit? I'm not sure we have to be quite that clear about it because commissioners feel that that's pretty politically volatile right now, but I think that really is kind of boiling down what's the conversation. How does this community of almost 600,000 people really feel about transit? And what do we want to do as far as that direction? Number 3 talks about comprehensive review of our sewer development policy because we know that development really follows where sewer lines goes in this county. All of the utilities for development really can be put in place relatively easily because they're under pressure. Water lines, gas lines, those sort of things, electricity, cable TV, etc., can be done without really kind of irrespective of the topography where it's located. Sewer, however, has to follow the topography because it's the most efficient way to go ahead and collect the wastewater and then go ahead and process it. And it's also very expensive, very deep from those perspectives. So we know that we have a major hand in how development goes in this community. The question is, does the commission want to go ahead and modify its policies to basically have developers be perceived as paying more their own way, or how does development occur across the entire landscape of the county? Do we visualize every square inch of this county being developed? And those being wrestled with, they're not easy answers, but that's going to be kind of a conversation. But probably an easier conversation than number 4, which deals with the courthouse. What do we do with the courthouse? What's the decision about the courthouse? So those are the 4 issues that we're talking about. Let's talk about a little more detail in some respects. First of all, vulnerable populations and poverty. We know we're not going to eliminate poverty in our lifetime. I get that. Poverty will always be among us from that perspective. But some things have become clear to me in the last few years. First of all, nobody is in poverty by choice. Nobody is in poverty by choice. We had a chance to go ahead and tour the downtown Kansas City area and go with some really talented people at there. Sister Berta, who does the Breakthrough House and so forth, makes that analogy and makes it very clear to us that people are not in poverty by choice. Second of all, that poverty is not a permanent condition. People come in and out of poverty all the time. So that it can be we can put things in place to help people come out of poverty and be self-sustaining and self-sufficient on their own right. So we're working those issues. We are trying to, let's give you some numbers to go ahead and remember. About 32,000 people in Johnson County are at 100% of poverty. That's a family of 3 earning about $18,000 a year or less. If you earn more than that, you're not in that category. I don't know how you survive on $18,000 a year or less, especially if you're a mom with 2 kids. We have as many people in poverty in Johnson County as are in Wyandotte County. Not the same percentage of the population, but the same number roughly as in Wyandotte County. Second statistic, 200% of poverty. Just double those numbers, a family of 3 earning less than $40,000 a year. We increased those numbers by over 100% the last 10 years. Now we have over 100,000 people that are at 200% of poverty and below. 100,000 people, about 1 in 6 in Johnson County in that category. And we thought that would go down during the recession. It's not. It's plateaued out. So we know that indeed your friends and neighbors are in those categories that indeed are struggling to go ahead economically to go ahead and be viable. So we're trying to find ways to go ahead and bring them into more productive positions, get a better job, better benefits, and so forth. So we're trying to figure out how to go ahead and do that. I think, so we're trying to work on trying to coordinate our safety net services to be more efficient and effective to get people out of those activities, but we're trying to work on that in some real tangible ways. And that'll be our effort, is to go and make sure people can lead productive lives. One of the biggest areas we're talking about is trying to finance affordable child care and elder care. We know that one of the biggest expenses for a mom with 2 kids is not indeed housing, which is substantial, or transit substantial, it is child care. Where a mom has to go ahead and figure out, do I go ahead and pay for child care? and then work as well, but work doesn't pay enough for child care, or do I stay at home and foreclose work? Those are tough decisions to go ahead and make happen. So having affordable child care, we know indeed will help those kids grow up to be great members of society. We're trying to work on those issues as we come forward. So a lot of work to be done in that area. Second area, and I think it really more like transit from that activity, but we're going to kind of ease ourselves into the conversation with commissioners. We're going to give commissioners a lot of information about our surface transportation issues. We know how to build roads in Johnson County. We know where they should go, we know they have the finance, we know where it should be, we know the traffic volumes. We got the Gateway project going out, you know, every day from that perspective. We're spending lots of money on that. So we know about surface transportation, but we're going to review that with them to make sure that we don't have any gaps there. We know where railroads are going. It's pretty well defined that way. The intermodal facility is eating up that capacity and those sort of things. We know where we should go ahead and put in bike paths. We've got that pretty well locked down. Park Cars does a pretty good job in that area. We know complete streets. Complete streets is the way to kind of make sure that streets we put in are walkable, have green space, have enough traffic volume to go and accommodate everything as far as that's concerned. That we know about. What we don't know about is what is the consensus of this community about transit, about buses, those sort of things. People like instead of just welding ourselves to the vehicle, what is our vision about that activity? So we hope to have a conversation with the commissioners about that. We hope they allow us the flexibility to engage the public in a robust conversation. We're not quite sure if they'll do that or not. We'll see what happens. That's really kind of the issue. We are doing a lot of stuff with the KCATA. You'll be seeing now the buses being rebranded from the Joe to basically Ride KC. You'll see this being kind of changed over time to make ourselves in common with the rest of the region. We've done a lot of work that way. Instead of having 5 separate systems, which we still have, we're trying to go and mail it into one by virtue of having a common place you go to on the internet. If you want to go and get from here to there, it'll map out a way to get it to you. We're trying to do a common fare, so $3 buys a trip wherever you go in the metro area, those sort of things, a way to go and pay that is universal from that perspective. So we're working on many things to go and make transit work. But we still have yet to define, in my viewpoint, really what is the vision for transit in Johnson County. Is it a different vision for the Northeast than the Southwest? Probably is, but how do we articulate that and what do we do about it? That's going to be part of our challenge. Third area talks about sewer lines, I've said before. Where does growth go? And I think it's a challenging conversation for the commissioners because for the last 50 years, we've done pretty well with our current policies. Wherever a developer wants to go and put in a development, we say yes. We extend the sewer lines, and they build a new development and build shopping around it and so forth. That's how we've grown, basically doubling our population each and every 10 years. That's huge since the 1940s. Big thing. Now the question becomes, if we expand so much, are we giving too much, I guess, leverage, if you will, flexibility to developers to allow leapfrog development? Is that really a situation that we want to mitigate? Do we want to control where development should occur inside cities or outside cities in the unincorporated area? Do we think every square inch of Johnson County should be developed? Those are tough questions. So we're trying to encourage the commissioners to think about that and to kind of give us some guidance so we know in orderly development as we progress. Now let's remember that each and every year we bring into Johnson County between 8,000 and 10,000 to 12,000 people each and every year. So the city size of Hays, Kansas comes in every 2 years. That's significant from my perspective. So how do we handle that kind of growth? And where are they going to be occupied? We know that the number of single-family homes being built is about half what it was before. The number of apartments, 12,000, either in the pipeline or the next few years coming up. That's huge, a huge shift from that perspective. So how the landscape of Johnson County is changing, and what sort of impact do we have in our sewer lines to go and mitigate that? As I said before, the big juggernaut is the courthouse. If you look across the landscape as far as our organization, the building that is most inappropriate for its current use is the courthouse. But nobody loves the courthouse. Nobody goes with a great deal of joy, right? Well, let's come and go to the courthouse today. Woohoo! No. No one has that, but we require that, and that facility brings in between 600 and 500,000 people each and every year. But nobody talks about it around the Thanksgiving room table. We get it's the place where we go ahead and battle it out in court. And it's the place that reflects our democracy. It talks about the rule of law. Instead of settling our differences in a gun battle or a knife fight or so forth, we battle it out in court. That's not lost on me, but the existing facility is inappropriate for its current use. We have the most difficult conversations occurring in that facility in the hallway. Where is Junior going to go and spend the rest of his life? How are we going to divide up the assets from our parents? Is my nephew going to go to jail or not? What about drug rehab, etc.? And those conversations don't happen in a private room where they should. They happen in the hallway. When we have, I guess, individuals who are suspected of a crime are shackled up and are walking down the corridor right next to the victim, that's not very good. That's inappropriate from a safety perspective. Courthouses in this country have been built for two reasons: a fire or a murder. Do we have to wait that long to go and repair this particular facility? It was built in 1952. It's had 7 different additions. We have over 100 restrooms in that facility. It's not ADA compliant. We know that we put in conference rooms where courtrooms are right now. We convert conference rooms into courtrooms to make all that work. People have pillars in the middle of the courtroom to go ahead and kind of watch the proceedings. It is an inappropriate place from that perspective. We've got to figure out some way we're going to deal with it. If we do nothing, the existing courthouse will cost us about $41 million just to maintain its current use. Because why? The windows need to be replaced. They're literally falling off. We're going to see a contract this next week to go and remove the some big granite columns on the west side of the building because they're falling off. So it really is in a bad state of repair. You open up the faucets there, you get brown water out of the faucets. It's ridiculous. So there's no real love for that building, but the reality is it is our icon from that perspective of how we feel about democracy. So it's going to be at about $141 million tab if indeed they choose to go and replace the courthouse. A big chunk of money, don't get me wrong. But I got to think there's about 25 different high schools in Johnson County, each one of which costs around $220 million. So we're talking about 2/3 of one high school for the entire county of Johnson County. That's what we're talking about. Estimates right now to go and build a courthouse, if you use a sales tax, is about a 1/4 cent sales tax for 7 years will pay it off. Or a 2 mil levy increase, just did 3.3, but a 2 mil levy increase for the next 20 years to pay off those activities. But we've got to find a decision about the courthouse so we don't let those people continue to figure out what the hell is going on. We have DAs, our district attorney's office, that they don't have this kind of equipment in the courtroom. They go ahead and make up the boards and bring the easels down the boards and show the jury that activity on hard copy. That's done in the Perry Mason days, right? We've advanced to that point, we would think. So we're trying to get ourselves into the 21st century with the courthouse and making all that work on a regular basis. We've got to figure out that solution. I don't know what it is. We need to figure out what it is and kind of go from that point. What's on the horizon here? Let me go back and stop here. Any questions about these 4 priorities?
Yes.
Yeah.
The $41 million to maintain that courthouse is over what period?
Over about an 8-year period.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, about an 8-year period. We actually might advance that because we need to do some really ADA compliant activities if we can make it so it actually might be accelerated to a 5-year time frame. Well, it's about 8 years from that perspective. So you got to spend money on it one way or the other. Good question. Yeah.
What would it cost to maintain the new facility over 8 years?
Well, to maintain it, the cost for a new facility would be about $141 million. That includes demolition of the old facility. So the operational costs, we're updating those numbers, but it's significantly less to operate a new facility than an old one. This is an energy hog facility. There really is very little insulation in the building. So it would actually be more efficient to go and do a new building than the existing building. It would also be more efficient, we think, and more effective on security. The one entryway for security, limiting some of the bottlenecks from that perspective. So operational costs, a new building would be less than the existing building, substantially. We're trying to I can't give you the exact numbers, they're not on the top of my head, but I know it's significantly less a new building than the existing building. And we're not planning to add square footage. We're talking about basically 26 courtrooms. The number of cases being filed is a little bit less than it was in previous years. Crime rates in Johnson County are very stagnant. We're seeing some increases in violent crime the last few years, which is unfortunate, but the number of cases is about the same. And we did a lot of work in the courthouse to go and reduce filing areas. We've gone all electronic, so literally room after room after room that had files now are gone. They've all been digitized, which is great that way. We've eliminated a lot of court staff by virtue of electronic filing. So we try to bring the staff down, and we're probably leaders in the state, if not in the Midwest, if not in the country, in kind of how we do court operations efficiently. So square footage is not the issue from my perspective, but the way we've chopped up that space, it's just inappropriate for its current use. I'll probably give you a lot more than you want to add. Yes, sir?
If we were to demolish the old building,
Yep.
where would all those services be moved to, and what would that cost?
Well, we're not going to move any of the service. What we basically do is we'd have the services that are currently in the courthouse go, we'd build a new courthouse while keeping this courthouse going. Then we'd move everybody there and kind of demolish the building over here. So services would be unaffected. Building a new courthouse probably would be the most, I guess, the easiest on court functions, because you wouldn't disrupt court functions. To replace or repair the existing building while court's going on, that would be very disruptive. So the services would be maintained. There would not be any disruption of that, which is important. Good question. Yeah.
Are there any plans for the transit system to hook up with the streetcar line that's supposed to put in, or is that still being talked about?
Question was, is there any plans to go and have our transit system connect with the street line? There is a thought about that. I wouldn't say hardcore plans. We had a meeting yesterday with the Transportation Coordinating Council in the region, and a lot of celebration about the streetcar, and that idea was reinforced again, so we got to make those direct connections. I think there'll be some connections, yes, but it's a matter of how where we get the resources to do that. And I think we've got to explore that more carefully. I think there are some connections, but I don't think it's as robust as it needs to be. I don't want to mislead you. Other folks in transit may have a better answer to that. But that's my understanding. You can get there, but it's not very effective. I think the streetcar thing is going to be a dynamite deal. I think it's going to be a great redevelopment for that part of the region. I think many millennials want to have that kind of access to transit. When I talk to my kids, they don't care much about the car. They got a car or not. What they care about is this. You know, do I have connectivity 4 ways from Sunday? But not necessarily a car. They want to get someplace, and not having a car is probably good with them from their perspective. I think we've got to handle that problem. We've got to make that connection. I'd like to see, frankly, Metcalf be a robust transit corridor which has operations 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, with 15-minute headway, so you can plan on it and plan your schedule and park your car, be able to go ahead and use transit on that corridor and get to where you want to in the metro area on a transit system. And I want to include that to say you go to the airport as well. Not getting to the airport's a real problem from my perspective. That's my agreement. We'll see. Good question. Other questions? Yeah.
Do they have a proposed place for the new courthouse, or has that been talked about?
Is there a proposed place for the courthouse? It has been talked about. Remember, we have 15 years of studies on this. Just talked to Joe Waters and so forth. He lived it and breathed it for a long time. So we've had about, I guess, 8 or 10 studies on it. Most of which has confirmed that it should stay in Olathe, first of all. There were conversations about it locating out to Gardner, locating at Overland Park, other places. It was felt among all 7 commissioners that it should stay in downtown Olathe. And then in downtown Olathe, the area being looked at is on the north side of the current facility. So it's basically north across Santa Fe to the west of the existing Olathe City Hall. There's a vacant building now that they own. They have talked about giving that property to us for free. We're going to try to hold it to them if we actually do this project. So I think they're willing to go ahead and work with us to make that project. That's currently the location we're looking at just north across the existing location of the courthouse. And that's also important because we have the jail just to the west of the courthouse where we actually bring in prisoners in jail and actually then use the tunnel to go across underneath the street to go to the court. So we want to extend that tunnel going, if you will, north as an L shape to the new facility if we decide to build it in that location. We need to take advantage of our existing resources. Good question. There's another question over here too.
Mine was the same one.
You're thinking alike. Okay, good. Gotcha. Any other questions? Yeah.
What would happen then to that space once that courthouse was demolished?
Were we to go ahead and demolish the existing courthouse, that probably would go to green space and be part of the expanding the plaza, if you will, for Olathe. There is some conversation that says we shouldn't demolish the entire area, but just demolish those areas that were added on since 1952, retaining the old courthouse that we'll have some affinity to, which actually was built to be some very majestic courtrooms. And that's being talked about as well. So it may not be totally demolished, maybe demolished 80% or so forth. And I say maybe because the commissioners have decided if they want to do anything. And we don't know yet how it's going on. We're meeting actually tomorrow afternoon with the commissioners to say, here's the previous studies, here's where we were last. When last we left this 3 years ago, 4 years ago, this was the proposal, which was to build a new courthouse north of the existing courthouse. Do you want us to update that information or not? Do you want us to seek other proposals? And we'll get that direction from them tomorrow.